we basically looked for companies where we thought we could understand what the future would look like 5 or 10 or 15 years hence. And that didn't mean we had to do it to 4 decimal places or anything of the sort, but we had to have a feel for it. And we had to know our limitations. So we stayed away from a lot of things. And at that time, prices were different. So in terms of knowing we were getting enough for our money, it was a much easier decision than it is currently. But there weren't elaborate, there were no planning sessions or anything of the sort. We kept reading and we kept thinking and we kept looking at things that came along as Charlie described it in the movie, and comparing opportunity A with opportunity B. And in those days we were capital constrained, so we usually had to sell something if we were going to buy something else, and that always makes for that's an interesting challenge always when you're measuring something you hold against something that has come along and to see which is more attractive. And we probably leaned very much toward things where we felt we were certain to get a decent result than where we were hopeful of getting a brilliant result. That's went with our instincts and kept putting one foot in front of the other. Charlie, what would you say?
Well, that's exactly what we did, and it worked wonderfully well. And part of it is because we're such splendid people and worked so constructively, and part of it is we were a little lucky. We had some good fortune. Now, Warren says he was lucky to go to Geico, but not every 20-year-old was going down to Washington, D.C. and knocking on the doors of empty buildings to try and find something out that he was curious about. So we made some of our luck by being curious and seeking wisdom, and we certainly recommend that to anybody else. And there's nothing that proves his wisdom more thoroughly than really getting your own nose whacked hard when you make a mistake. And we had a fair amount of that, didn't we?
We had plenty of them. If you'll read this book, you'll see about a few of them. We thought we knew about the department store business in Baltimore, and we thought we knew about the trading stamp business. And we've had a lot of experience with bad businesses, and that makes you appreciate a good one. And to some extent, it sharpens your ability to make distinctions between good and bad ones. And we've had a lot of fun along the way. That helps too. I mean, if you're enjoying what you're doing, you're likely to get a better result than if you go to work with your teeth clenched every morning.
I think we were helped because we came from families where there were some admirable people, and we tended to identify other admirable people better than we would have coming from a different background. So my deceased wife used to say, you can't accomplish much in one generation. We owe a considerable amount, both of us, to the families we were raised in. I think the family standards helped us to identify the good people more easily than we would have if we'd had a more disadvantaged background. Do you agree with that, Warren?
Yeah. Have you still got your father's briefcase? Or?
I still got it, but I don't know where it is. I can't carry it anymore. It's worn out. It's got holes in it.
Yeah. I got my dad's desk from 75 years ago. This is pineapple juice, incidentally. People were questioning that. They say it's good for your throat if you're going to talk a long time.
Yes, well, of course, reputation you get over a long period of time. Very few people are like Charles Lindbergh, where you just suddenly have a great reputation. Most of us have to acquire one very slowly, and that was true in Berkshire's case. And in any individual, you just have to get the best reputation you can in the years you're allotted and the time available. And it may work out well, it may work out poorly, but it's a wise investment. I see all the time opportunities come to people where it's the credibility they've gotten in the past that causes them to have the new opportunity. So I think hardly anything is more important than behaving well as you go through life. And I think we actually try to behave better as we got more prosperous. And I think you'd be crazy if you didn't. So I certainly recommend that you follow those old-fashioned principles. And I don't think there's any way of guaranteeing a total powerhouse brand, nor can, if a result is a 1 in 50 million type result, you're probably not going to get them.
Johnny Agnelli of Fiat, back in, I think it was 1988, I was at dinner with him one time, and he said something to me that stuck with me. He said, when you get old, he says, you'll have the reputation you deserve. He said, he said, for a while you can fool people, but he says, when he was talking about himself at the time, but he said, when you get to be my age, he says, whatever reputation you have, it's probably the one you deserve. And I think the same is true of companies. And frankly, it has helped Berkshire a whole lot, that it has gotten a reputation to be a somewhat different sort of company. I mean, I don't think we set out to do that exactly, but it has worked out that way.
Okay, this is a question. Oops, that's not the question. Hold on. Here it is. This is a question from John Wells right here in Omaha, and he says, you've described inflation as a gigantic corporate tapeworm. Which of Berkshire's businesses are best suited to thrive during a period of high inflation, and why? Which will suffer the most, and why?
Yeah, well, the best businesses during inflation are usually the best. They're the businesses that you buy once, and then you don't have to keep making capital investments subsequently. So you do not face the problem of continuous reinvestment involving greater and greater dollars because of inflation. That's one reason real estate in general is good during inflation. If you built your own house 55 years ago like Charlie did, or bought one 55 years ago like I did, it's a one-time outlay. Whereas if you get an inflationary expansion in replacement capital without having to replace yourself. And if you got something that's useful to someone else, it tends to be priced in terms of replacement value over time. So you really get the inflationary kick. Now, if you're in a business such as the utility business or the railroad business, it just keeps eating up more and more money, and your depreciation charges are inadequate, and you're kidding yourself as to your real economic profits. So any business with heavy capital investment tends to be a poor business to be in inflation, and often it's a poor business to be in generally. And the business where you buy something once, a brand is a wonderful thing to own during inflation. See's Candy built their brand many years ago. Now we've had to nourish it as we've gone along, but the value of that brand increases during inflation, just as the value of really any strongly branded goods. Gillette bought the entire radio rights to the World Series in 1939. And as I remember, it cost them $100,000, and for that they got to broadcast the Yankees, I think, versus the Reds in 1939. And think of the number of impressions they made on minds in 1939 for $100,000, and they were getting into the minds of young guys like myself. I was 8 or 9, and millions of people, and they did it in those dollars then. And of course, if you were going to go out and try and have a similar impressions on millions of minds now, it costs a fortune, and part of that's due to inflation, part of it's due to other things. But it was a great investment which could be made in 1939 that paid off in terms of selling razors and blades in 1960 and 1970 and 1980 so that's the kind of business you want to own. Charlie?
Well, yeah, but if the inflation ever goes completely out of control, you have no idea how it's going to end up. If it weren't for the Weimar inflation, we might never have had Adolf Hitler. It was the twosome of the great German inflation followed by the Great Depression that brought us Hitler. And think of the price that the world paid for that one. We don't want inflation because it's good for See's candy.
No, I didn't quite realize I was
No,
proposing that.
I wasn't criticizing it. But
What's good for See's candy is good for the United States.
This question, which is a little bit offbeat, comes from Jordan Shapoff of Melbourne, Australia. Mr. Buffett, in the foreword to the 6th edition of Benjamin Graham's Security Analysis, you identified 4 books that you particularly cherish. 3 of these books were authored by Graham himself, and their influence on you is well known. The contributions of the 4th book to your thinking, however, that book was Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. What that book meant to you is seldom discussed. So my question is, what did you learn from The Wealth of Nations, and how did it shape your investment and business philosophy?
Well, it doesn't shape my investment philosophy, but I certainly learned economics from it. And my friend Bill Gates gave me an original copy of it. So I was able to study it as Adam Smith wrote it in 1776. There's just, if you read Adam Smith, and if you read Keynes, Ricardo, and if you also read that little book we've got out there called "Where Are the Customers' Yachts," you will have a lot of wisdom. I forgot to mention, I was supposed to mention too, that we didn't want to put it on sale earlier because it would have given away the movie, but we do have Berkshire Bomber underwear out there, or sweatshirts, or whatever it may be. So Fruit of the Loom has those, and we have Fred Schwetz's "Where Are the Customers' Yachts" book, which contains an incredible amount of wisdom in very few pages and very entertaining. But if you want to not only get a lot more wisdom but appear more erudite, you should read The Wealth of Nations also. Charlie?
well, yeah, guys is really worn well. I mean, he is rightly recognized as one of the wisest people that ever came along. And of course, the lessons that he taught way back then were taught again when communism failed so terribly, and people like Singapore and Taiwan and China and so forth came up so fast. The productive power of the capitalist system is simply unbelievable. And he understood that fully and early, and he's done a lot of good.
I took an idea of his on the specialization of labor, and he talked about people making pins or something, but I applied that actually to philanthropy. The idea that you let other people do what they're best at and stick with what you're best at, I've carried from mowing my lawn to philanthropy, and it's a wonderful thing to just shove off everything and saying somebody else is better than that, and than I am at that, and then work in the field that's most productive for you.
You didn't do your own bowel surgery either.
No. I'm not sure I have any reply to that.
Mr. Buffett and Mr. Munger. My name is Neil Gonetti Wall from South Florida, and I'm currently in 7th grade. My question is, how do you make lots of friends and get people to like you and work with you?
That's not a bad question. Very good question.
Well, I was pretty obnoxious when I was your age and asked a lot of impertinent questions. And not everybody liked me. And so the only way I could get the people to like me a little bit was to get very rich and very generous. That will work.
People will see all kinds of virtues in you if they think you'll write a check. Yeah, the truth is, both Charlie and I were on the obnoxious side early on, but you should get a little smarter about human behavior as you get older. And I turned out to have some pretty good teachers as I went along in terms of what worked. I mean, I have looked at other people during my lifetime and had these wonderful teachers. They weren't teachers in the standard definition, but they were people I admired, and I thought to myself, why do I admire these people? And if I want to be admired myself, why shouldn't I take on some of their qualities? So it's not a complicated proposition. If you look around you at the people you like in your school, write down 3 or 4 things they do that make you like them, and then look around at the 3 or 4 people that turn you off, and write down those qualities and decide that you're going to be a person you yourself would like, that you take on the qualities of the person on the left. You're generous, you're friendly, you accept things with good humor, you don't claim credit for things you don't do, all of these things, and they're all possible to do. And if you like that in other people, people are going to like it in you. And if you find things that are kind of obnoxious, you're always late, and you're always claiming credit for more than you do, and you're kind of negative on everything, and you don't like those in other people, get rid of them in yourself, and you'll find out it works pretty well.
And it really works in marriage. If you can change yourself instead of trying to change your spouse, that's a good idea.
Charlie has said the most important thing in selecting a marriage partner is that you don't look for intelligence or humor or character. He says you look for someone with low expectations.